Elena believed everything had settled. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough for life to feel steady again. She had built a life that worked again, a life that had its own quiet logic, its own pace, its own small pleasures that didn't depend on anyone else to feel real. Mornings with coffee while the apartment was still warm and silent. Evenings that ended at their own gentle pace. Days that moved forward without interruption, without the sudden weight that used to appear without warning and sit down beside her like an uninvited guest. And somewhere along the way, the past had softened. It no longer demanded attention. It no longer appeared unexpectedly. It had simply faded. Or so she thought. That morning, nothing felt different. The same light, the same table, the same untouched coffee beside her. She reached for her phone without thinking, unlocked it, looked at the screen, and then paused. It wasn't a message, it wasn't a call or a notification or anything designed to demand her attention. It was something smaller than that. A detail, the kind of thing you could scroll past without a second thought on any other morning. Easy to miss. But she didn't miss it. She looked closer, her eyes narrowing slightly the way they do when something registers but hasn't quite been understood yet. And then it landed. Clear and quiet and impossible to ignore now that she'd seen it. He was still there, not in her life, not in her routines or her conversations or the living, breathing presence she had worked carefully to rebuild. But somewhere, in some small digital corner of the world, not completely gone. Elena didn't react immediately. There was no sharp intake of breath, no sudden wave of memory crashing over her, no emotion arriving loud and unannounced, just a quiet awareness. A subtle shift inside her, like noticing a shadow that had always been there, but only now becoming visible. She leaned back slowly. Her fingers relaxed around the phone. Her breathing remained calm, and that surprised her. The calm, because she knew herself. She knew how this kind of moment would have felt a year ago. A year ago, something this small would have carried enormous weight. It would have reopened everything. It would have arrived like a stone dropped into still water, spreading outward, disturbing the surface long after the impact. But this morning, the stone barely made a ripple. She sat with that for a moment, curious about it, almost studying it the way you study an old photograph and try to remember exactly how it felt to be inside that moment, knowing you can recall it without returning to it. And that's when she understood something. Time hadn't erased him. That had never really been the goal, though sometimes it's easy to mistake the two. You tell yourself you want to forget, when what you actually want is to be free. And those are not the same thing. Forgetting is passive. Freedom is something you arrive at. What time had done was change him, changed what he meant, changed the space he occupied. He had moved, not out of existence, but out of relevance, out of the present and into the past, where things live differently, where they don't pull at you the same way, where they can exist without requiring anything from you in return. He was no longer part of her story. but he was still part of her memory. And those two things, story and memory, are not the same thing at all. Your story is what's happening now. It's the choices you're making, the mornings you're living, the person you are becoming. Your memory is the archive, full of things that shaped you, things that hurt you, things that made you who you are. The archive matters, but you don't live in it. She looked out the window. A bus stopped at the corner. People stepped in. Others stepped out. No one hesitated. No one looked back. Life moved forward, simple, continuous, unaware. Eleanor watched for a moment, then looked back at the phone. The presence was still there, unchanged, quiet. And she realized some things don't leave, they just move further away, to a place where they no longer affect you, but still exist. She placed the phone down gently, next to her coffee, and for the first time in a long time, she felt something unexpected. Not sadness, not relief, just clarity.